There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Sean Breeze Books. Welcome back to my channel and another Friday Reads. I'm filming in the living room because Kenji's out walking Mum's dog, so I've got a few minutes of uninterrupted time. And I've had a good week. I'm still struggling with insomnia, but that isn't very interesting to talk about in great detail. It is getting a little better, and I now am using some over-the-counter sleep medication a couple times a week as well. But enough about that. I just woke up from a long afternoon nap, so if I look a little groggy, that's why. Anyhow, I was going to say, let's meet this week's mystery guest, but I have to get used to the fact that there are no more mystery guests. I made a big announcement about that last week. I appreciate all the supportive comments, and if you want more information about that, you can go back to last week's Friday Reads for all the details. But my Friday Read should be a little shorter, and perhaps more, what did Sean read and what did he think of it, focused. I don't have any special news otherwise, so let's get going. I'm working on a long book haul video, which should be done this weekend. And I am going to be adding a few book haul books at the end of this and every Friday Reads for the next while to see how that goes. And if you are not interested in book haul stuff, you can just stop watching when I get to that part at the very end, all right? I have finished 3 books, and I'm going to maybe talk about a few others. It's Tanzania week on my channel. First of all, a work of Tanzanian fiction translated from the Swahili. Rosa Mistika by Euphrase Kezilahabi. Translated from the Swahili by J. Boss Rubin. And just newly in print, or newly back in print this year. And this was for my Patreon book club. And we had a really good discussion on it. And I hated it. I thought it was awful. But what do I mean when I say that? What I mean is it just didn't work for me at all. There was a lot more thoughtful people that liked, I don't know that anybody in the book club loved it, but there were a lot of appreciative comments about it, and I didn't have any. I just thought it was a complete waste of my time. It was originally published in the early 70s, I think, in Swahili, and it's about a young Tanzanian woman on Victoria Island with an alcoholic father and a loving mother. And the parents want her to get educated because they know that's the only future she has. So it has all the markings of something. Oh, this is going to be great. But I just thought it was very clumsily told, and it couldn't have been narrated in a less interesting way for me personally. Editing Sean here. I needed to insert this because this was the key aspect of my critique, my over-the-top ranty critique. The character development was so lousy. There were no real character arcs that made any sense. In fact, I would go so far as to say there was no character development of any kind. Oh, my God. She goes away to boarding school, and then she's very studious and doesn't do anything naughty, and then she decides she needs a man, so she becomes very sexually promiscuous, and men take advantage of her, and some teachers take advantage of her, and she's betrayed, and there was none of that I objected to. It just read like it was melodramatic and inartfully narrated, and I just read it to the end. So I'm not going to spend any more time on it because you will find lots of much more positive comments online and probably in the comments on this video, but I loathed it. What a waste of my valuable reading time. So that happened. Much more positively, I finished Volume 6 of the Mhaoileoin series, the Unselected Journals of Mhaoileoin by Beth Brower. Reading this to Mary Jean, and we finished it this week. It's lovely. Each one gets a little better, and I wasn't completely sold on Volume 1, and then by Volume 2, I was deep into it, and with each successive volume, I'm more into it. I don't think I'm going to say any more than that. It's in the middle of a series. I think she's working on Volume 14. So this is going to be a series that stretches on into infinity, and I love it. If you don't know anything about the Mhaoileoin series, I think it's 1883 that the series starts. We're now into 1884, and it's in epistolary format in the form of journal entries. And in the beginning of this volume, in January 1884, Mhaoileoin has finally turned 21 or whatever, age of majority. Was it 20, 21, whatever that was? And so she's got a bit more independence and a little bit more out from under the thumb of her horrible relatives. She's an orphan. And that's all I'm going to say about it. It's funny, but there's deeper themes. That hits my sweet spot, and Mary Jean's enjoying it. That's all I'm going to say. But wildly popular, and I can see what all the fuss is about. Now, I have just this morning finished another Tanzanian novel, and that one went much better. Much, much better. And that's the latest by the Nobel Prize-winning Abdulrazak Gurnah, Theft. And when I got my copy from Blackwell's, it came in a signed edition. So how cool is that? And I really enjoyed this. It's a bit puzzling because it was definitely a loose, baggy monster. And I think I'd have to knock a point off for how unfocused and how indulgent it was. What do I mean by indulgent? He went a lot of places in a kind of a meandering way, and I was never really sure what the story was going to be until well over at the halfway point. There were no real stakes in the story until about halfway or later, and I struggled with that a bit, but I still feel that it was a very satisfying read. It was very quiet. About three, especially two young men from Zanzibar, which is now in a co-federal kind of way part of Tanzania, that got brought to the mainland of Tanzania as young men. And the young woman that was the third character, I thought she got short shrift. Her character was not as developed as the other two, but it was really engaging. It wouldn't be for everybody because it's very quiet and it's really meandering. You're never really sure, okay, what is the point of all this? But I don't really need there to be a point when there's well-drawn characters. So with the exception of the one supposedly main female character who I didn't feel came as alive on the page as the two young men, Badar and Karim. I thought it was just lovely. Probably not his best work. It's only the second one I've read. I read Afterlives a couple of years ago. And just like with Afterlives, which I thought was better, this is for a Zoom discussion, which I'll be having with my same two interlocutors as I did with Afterlives. Roz of Scally-Daddling About the Books, and Tilly of Tilly Shelf. And that Zoom chat is happening at 9 a.m. tomorrow, i.e. Friday, right around the same time this video goes live, and that will go on our channels probably early next year. A slow burn read that was satisfying, a bit confounding, but I was never bored. I want to read everything this man has written and whatever he writes after this. But probably a 4-star read, because there was something a bit confoundingly undisciplined about the way that it was structured or not structured. So I have to take a mark off for that, but I did really quite enjoy it. So that's what I finished. I have started one book with Mary Jean, and that's a novel by David Carpenter called The Gold. And this one is from about 2017, I think. And somewhere between 350 and 400 pages. And what a departure. I've read a fair amount of David Carpenter's fiction. He's a local author, and if you don't know, I'm doing a series of interviews with him. He's now in his mid-80s, and he was a former prof of mine and now a much beloved personage in my social and bookish life here in town. And the fiction that I have read was much earlier in his career. This is so good. It's so much more layered, and I'm just 3 or 4 chapters in, but it's starting out in a way that it's quite breathtaking. How mature of a novel it's starting out to be. It is set in around World War I. The opening is in around World War I. A British boy in Yorkshire. His dad's a miner, doesn't want his kids to become miners. He drops dead very young, the dad, and the mother has just got remarried. But I know that the protagonist, the young boy Joseph Burbage, is going to come to Canada's north to look for gold, and that's the storyline. But boy, it's sure starting out wonderfully. So that's what's in progress. And I want to talk about that feeling that often happens when I'm reading a book, and the book is starting out, I'm loving it, or I'm really into it, and then something a little off happens a ways further into the book, and so then I'm worried, is it going to go off the rails completely, or is this just a minor blip, or is there something wrong with me this day that I read this passage and was so unhappy about it? But a couple examples of that. And my buddy reader, Leah, disagrees with me quite intensely on this point. We're both loving Elizabeth Jane Howard's novel, Getting It Right, and then there was a major plot development where two characters that had no business falling into bed together fell into the bed together, and it didn't gross me out, but it made me cringe because it seemed so wrong. And I'm not talking about morality, I'm just talking about, no, that doesn't ring true to me. This is so weird. No, it's not right. Now, Leah disagrees. She thought that rather surprising part of the plot just made complete sense to her. But that's interesting. So I don't think it soured me on the novel, and I don't think the two people that fell into bed are probably going to be together in the end. I guess if they are, I will be disappointed, because I just think it was a false step in the story when there were so many sexual romantic possibilities between various of the characters that these two interesting characters, one of them was the main character and the other one's a fascinating minor character, but just that didn't make any sense emotionally to me that they would connect in that particular way. So we'll see how it goes. I hope that by the end I don't think that Elizabeth Jane Howard, the author of Getting It Right, has ended up getting it wrong. And Heidi and I are buddy reading this Newfoundland Canadian novel, Hides by Rod Moody-Corbett, and I loved it. I checked in on a little bit last week. We were both quite happy, but neither of us liked the second set of chapters this week nearly as much. I won't say anything in detail about Heidi's reaction, but she did agree with me that it was really overwritten. Now, the protagonist is an English prof and a loser, but very pedantic. So I got accustomed to the vocabulary in the first part, and he was talking about his life and his biographical history and things that he knew well, people he knew very well. So it didn't bother me, but now he's flown back to Newfoundland for this hunting trip, and there's a lot of new things, and he feels the need to describe everything with so many adjectives and phrases, and they're specific and annoying me that they're always pulling me out of the story. I think I have one example here. Again, you might just tell me, oh, that's lovely writing, Sean, what's wrong with you? But this paragraph really bugged me, or the last sentence in it. They're in the lodge for this trip that they've booked with this company that's a little bit mysterious, and they're just in the main building. Pausing before a hump of sported violets, a ladybug hopped onto the edge of my thumb. It fidgeted its wings, and a gray light gleamed through its ruddy carapace. I shook my hand and continued to the windows, where Isaac stood, eyeing a gluey pleat of sky. And it's that last phrase that just like a gluey pleat of sky. It sounds like 19th century poetry, but what the hell is it doing here? And there was so much like that. And I know that I'd need to give you much larger context to win you over to my side, that it's overwritten, but that phrase in particular, just... oof. Heidi and I are both hoping that week 3's chapters go better. All right, and I'm not starting anything, probably not starting anything or very much more for the rest of the year. Just going to finish up what I've got currently in progress. So let's do a few books for book haul to finish off. So if you're not interested in a book haul, you can stop watching now, and thanks for watching. Here is a book that I got at a used bookstore, and with Mum in mind, this is a series of memoir. And if I understand it, if I remember what I have read about it, it's about an English teacher from England going for a rest in the Hebrides. The Hills is Lonely by Lillian Beckwith, and there's a whole series of these, and I picked this hardcover one up at a used bookstore thinking Mum might enjoy having me read it to her. First published in 1959, if I can read the small print there, and this is a much later edition in the 1970s. I don't know that there's much else to say about it, but here's the opening paragraph. If you have never experienced a stormy winter's night in the Hebrides, you can have no idea of the sort of weather which I encountered when I arrived, travel-worn and weary, at the deserted little jetty where I was to await the boat which would carry me across to Incredible Island. It was a terrible night. A night to make one yearn for the fierce bright heat of an ample fire, for carpet slippers and a crossword puzzle. Yet here I stood, alone in the alien tempestuous blackness, sodden, cold, and dejected, my teeth chattering uncontrollably. On 3 sides of me the sea roared and plunged frenziedly, and a strong wind, which shrieked and wailed with theatrical violence, tore and buffeted at my clothes, and fought desperately to throw me off balance. The swift, relentless rain stung my eyes, my face, and my legs. It trickled from my ruined hat to seep in cheeky rivulets down my neck. It found the ventilation holes in my waterproof and crept exploratively under my armpits. And here is a novel of similar vintage, I think, that has been brought back into print by the British Library Women Writers series, The Love Child by Edith Olivier, which was published in 1927, and which I will probably also see if Mum wants me to read to her. The protagonist is a spinster who lived with her mother until her mother's death, and by that point Agatha was a confirmed spinster and socially awkward, and starts remembering her imaginary childhood friend, and plot ensues. Opening paragraph. Agatha Bodenham had unconsciously moved a pace or two from the others, and she stood isolated near the head of her mother's grave while the clergyman finished the service. She was wearing a dress of the shape and the tone of black, which her dressmaker thought suitable for morning orders, and her hat was quite without character. She did not cry, though her veil fluttered a little, as if her breath came uncertainly, and it was wet where a sudden gasp had drawn it into her mouth. Her face was expressionless, with a lack of expression so complete as to suggest more surely than the most speaking countenance an utter and irremediable loneliness. A loneliness that could not be broken, because it meant that she simply hadn't got the power of getting into touch with her fellow creatures. Perhaps Agatha felt nothing. Certainly, she could never tell what she felt, nor ask and receive sympathy. The title is interesting, The Love Child, in terms of how emotionally desolate she sounds at the beginning. And here is a new release from this year, I believe, or maybe late last year, a queer Irish novel. Oh dear, I don't know how to pronounce the author's name. I'll show it to you. It's called Ordinary Saints. And I think the first name is Niamh, but I have no idea the rest of it. Look it up, just a sec.
Hello, I'm Mhaoileoin. This is my debut novel, Ordinary Saints.
I believe the correct pronunciation is Mhaoileoin, and was shortlisted for the Women's Prize. And it is very, very queer and religious, or set in Catholic Ireland. The protagonist, Jay, who is female, was brought up in a devout household in Ireland. I don't need to know nothing more about the premise. And one of my followers, Jacqueline, has said it's, I think, your top read of the year. Opening paragraph. The first time I kissed a girl, my brother died. Oh my God. Oh no. Let's start again. The first time I kissed a girl, my brother died. I was 16 and at a party in a big house overlooking Dublin Bay. My brother was in Rome studying to be a priest. For most of the evening, though it was only St. Patrick's Day and still cold, I sat alone on an elaborate wooden patio chair, getting drunk and staring at the glimmer of the coastline, following the slow ferry's lights as it pulled out to sea. She's got my attention already. And the last one is a definite doorstopper of a novel from the Netherlands, The Remembered Soldier by Anja Danja, translated from the Dutch by David McKay, and this is set in Flanders, 1922, and involving a soldier who has lost his memory and is in a psychiatric institution, and that's all I need to know about that. Our protagonist his name is Noon, and here is that opening paragraph. Maybe this is the last time he will walk down the familiar corridor as the man called Noon Merkham. That door there on the left, with those welcoming panes of glass, could mean the end of his existence. Weak in the knees, like a man being dragged to the gallows. That's how he feels in this instant, as the hope that sustained him, the certainty that everything would be new and better beyond imagining and normal at last, that he would pass through that everyday door and be another man when he came out. A man with a home and a family and a life outside these walls. All drains away. And he comes to a halt on the sun-dappled tiles, and Brother Reginald turns toward him and sees the desperation on his face, and murmurs that God will never test Noon more harshly than he can bear, and gives an encouraging nod. And Noon remains silent, because in his 4 years here, he has not seen much to reassure him about God's notions of what is bearable. And that is quite a stunning opening paragraph. One of my top-tier patrons and top viewers and supporters of my channel, Alina, and I will be buddy reading this next year. Probably take almost the whole darn year to read, and I can't wait to dive in. All right, welcome to my new format, or going back to the old format with the addition of a few book haul books, Friday Reads, at the end of 2025. Thanks so much for watching.